This wide receiver is set to explode this next season. I mean, we are looking at a player that was a very polarizing prospect, but had elite traits, comes in, dominates year one. And if we are going to look at his historical comparables and project that out to year two, and then take into account that the man's getting a quarterback upgrade, I mean, the sky's going to be the limit here. Make sure you stay till the end of the video so you can actually see the real numbers down there on the paper. But before we get into it, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And of course, if you play Dynasty, you will love flogfantasy.com. You can find the link in the comment section and the description. When you sign up for flogfantasy.com with promo code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription. And with promo code FLOCK, yours truly will go through and make a podcast breaking down your Dynasty team with that mother Flocker tier. Plus, you get access to all of your favorite Dynasty analysts and all these perks that are on the screen. But I think that should be about it. We actually wrote this article on flogfantasy.com a couple days back, but we want to go through it on YouTube just so y'all can see it. We will be talking Chris Olave here. I just want to get this out of the way. I want to tell you exactly who we are going to be looking at. And I want to get in a quick little time machine, right? I want to go back to last offseason, where if you don't remember, Chris Olave was a player that people were trying to tell you not to draft. You had people saying, okay, he stayed all 4 years. I mean, he's an older player. You can't draft someone that stayed all 4 years in school, blah, 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 blah. He was outproduced by... Okay. We are going to get into exactly what was wrong with this profile, but why I was all about drafting Chris Olave, why I ranked him at the 106, which was ahead of consensus, even if it was behind Treylon Burks. I'll be the first one to admit that, and why I have him in so many Dynasty leagues. But if we are going to go through this prospect profile, we can't just look at the raw numbers. Obviously, we have the boxes that we can pull up and say, okay, well, he checked that one, he didn't check this one. But the reason we can't look at those boxes just on the surface is because Olave was in such a unique situation in college. That situation was Ohio State. I don't know if you realize this, but Chris Olave during his time at Ohio State has played with almost 10 NFL wide receivers, 5 of whom are very, very talented players and are about to take the league by storm. So let's go season by season. Let's put some context to what happened with Chris Olave. And one of the things that people didn't like about this profile is the fact Olave didn't break out as a freshman. And while that's true, yes, I want to see a freshman season breakout. And if you're playing at a school like, say, TCU is something, you're Quentin Johnston, yeah, give me that freshman season breakout. If you don't have it, you really don't have an excuse. You should be able to get that done if you are an elite level talent. Ohio State's a different situation, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Olave goes to Ohio State in 2018, and on that roster, you have a 22-year-old Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, like in year 5 at Ohio State. And then you also have Paris Campbell, who, of course, was a second-round NFL draft pick in his final season there. So you have final season Terry McLaurin, final season Paris Campbell. Olave is not able to get on the field at 17, 18 years old. Am I able to blame the man? No, of course you can't get on the field. You went to Ohio State. We know you're not getting on the field right away. But the second that those players leave, the second Terry McLaurin breaks out as a rookie in the NFL, Paris Campbell obviously drafted in the second round, you have Chris Olave vaulting up to be the #1 wide receiver at Ohio State, breaking out as a true sophomore, not only breaking out as a true sophomore, but at the same time, dominating over very talented players. You had Olave with 64 receiving yards per game. You had Garrett Wilson, 33 receiving yards per game. Jameson Williams, 28. Now, to be fair, of course, this is something that we don't want to hold too much against Garrett Wilson and too much against Jameson Williams. And I can't sit here and say, okay, yeah, Chris Olave is a way better wide receiver because he was better than these guys when they were freshmen. No, they were freshmen. Let's give them a little time to actually go through and develop here. So if we go over to 2020, this is a wide receiver room where you have Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, the wide receiver 1 in this draft class. And with this entire wide receiver room, Chris Olave goes out there and has 104 receiving yards per game. Now, I know that you're maybe saying, okay, well, Mason, this offense has so much talent. They must have had 400 passing yards per game. The 104 receiving yards per game may not be that impressive. Well, I'll let you know that even though, yes, they have Chris Olave, they have Garrett Wilson, they have Jamison Williams, they have Jackson Smith-Njigba, there weren't that many passing yards in this offense. This passing offense wasn't nearly as good as you would assume. You actually have a total of, I believe, 256 passing yards per game from a Mr. Justin Fields with Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams, Jackson Smith-Njigba. So this was 39% of the passing offense on a per game basis going to Chris Olave. Let's compare that to the wide receivers in this year's draft class. 39% is more than Jordan Addison ever saw. 39% is more than Quentin Johnston ever saw. 39% is more than Jackson Smith-Njigba ever saw. In a better wide receiver room than any of those guys have played in. This is why I was drafting Chris Olave. This season here in particular. That dominance amongst top competition is unheard of, and it's almost impossible to find. Now, going to his senior year, this is what dropped him a bit. This is why he didn't score as high as Drake London, as high as Garrett Wilson in our wide receiver prospect model. I will admit, senior season, not great. You're a senior. We expect continued dominance. Garrett Wilson jumps him. Jackson Smith-Njigba jumps him. That's why I'm so high on JSN in this year's NFL draft, where JSN 123 receiving yards per game, Garrett Wilson 96, and Chris Olave 85. It's not great, but going back to what we were talking about earlier on, you have to go deeper than just those initial surface numbers. We have to understand that wide receiver room at Ohio State and how good it was. Because looking back at how those players are performing in the NFL today, looking at the fact that Jamison Williams had to transfer to Alabama to even get playing time, I think that we can objectively say that this has been one of the best wide receiver rooms in college football history. Not the best, but one of the best. Now, if we are looking at his final score coming in, like I said, he does have that red flag where his senior season wasn't perfect. So if we are looking at our wide receiver prospect model, we scored Chris Olave as a 35. This is with all those advanced metrics that we are looking at. This is in the same range as Jerry Jeudy, Tyler Boyd, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, Corey Coleman, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Reagor, Christian Kirk, Odell, Brandon Cooks, A.J. Brown, Bryan Edwards. So it's not the 40 score where you have Drake London and Garrett Wilson only being next to the best of the best. We have a few busts in this range. And if we go through, if we look at the massive hits and the massive bust, what I want to stress is we knew who was who by year one. You had Corey Coleman, Jalen Reagor, Bryan Edwards, all busting year one, and we knew immediately that these guys weren't it, that these guys were trash. And the massive hits, Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb, Odell Beckham Jr., A.J. Brown, we knew these guys right away year one were massive hits, that they were league winners. And Chris Olave falls into the latter category. Chris Olave is that massive hit. Because if we go to how good his rookie season was, I first want to put some context behind this as well. He goes to a team that is rolling with Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, and Taysom Hill as their platoon of quarterbacks. Not necessarily great in my mind. I mean, if we were going to go ahead, if we were going to rate this quarterback room, I mean, a 35-year-old Andy Dalton is not getting the job done for me. I don't think we should be too optimistic on that front. I think that this was probably a bottom 5 quarterback room this past year. So you're getting, in my mind, some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL. Yet despite that, if we look at RotoViz and filter down wide receivers in year one since 2005 with 70 receiving yards per game, 6.5 targets per game, and 9.2 yards per target, keep in mind, with some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL, Chris Olave falls into a group of Odell Beckham Jr., Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, AJ Green, Keenan Allen. This is the who's who of wide receiver. This is absurd. If we look at what these guys did on average in year two, this group of guys on average in year two averaged 6.2 receptions per game and 81 receiving yards per game, both of which would have ranked inside the top 10 at the wide receiver position this past year. So the natural progression Chris Olave is on, the natural pace he has, puts him as a top 10 wide receiver next season. But that pace has been set with some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL. And I'm not a Derek Carr fan, but Derek Carr coming on will be better than 35-year-old Andy Dalton this past season. He will have not only that natural progression to be a top 10 wide receiver, but a large upgrade at quarterback at the same time. In my mind, this is like you have a fire going and then you go through and you pour gasoline on it. We didn't need the gasoline. The fire was going to be fine regardless, but we may just create an explosion here. Now, what I want to do real quick before we head off is I want to go look at my Dynasty rankings real quick with where we have Chris Olave, because honestly, I feel like we maybe need to move him up here a bit. So I'm going to pull up our wide receiver rankings. And what I first want to do is I want to look at the averages. This is going to account for everybody at Dynastyland Football, everybody at Fantasy Stock Exchange, everybody at Fantasy Endgame, and yours truly. And if we were looking at the averaged wide receiver rank across everyone here, Chris Olave is currently sitting as the wide receiver 10 as the 27th overall player in these rankings. But if I'm not looking at the average rankings and instead I'm just going to be sorting by my own, then at that point, I have Chris Olave bumping up to the wide receiver 9. And instead of being a mid-third round startup pick, I have him ranked at 22 overall. I have Chris Olave ranked as a second round startup pick. And honestly, I'm very comfortable taking him in that range. But I think that's all we got for you. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the vlog. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you want to check out this article, if you want to check out any of my exclusive articles or any of the exclusive articles from all your favorite Dynasty creators, same thing with everybody's rankings, everybody's bonus videos, exclusive live streams. You find all of that on vlogfantasy.com with the link in the comment section, link in the description. Promo code FLOCK, you'll get 30% off any subscription. And at the same time, with the Mother Flocker tier and promo code FLOCK, yours truly will go through and make a podcast of your Dynasty team. But thank you again. I appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day and really hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.